Hi, this lesson is to cover the Massachusetts Circuit Breaker Credit, Schedule CB. Now you'll see the credits menu in Tax Layer. The second from the bottom is the Senior Circuit Breaker Schedule CB, and it's the most common credit that we do for our taxpayers. In my site, we do maybe 30% of all taxpayers that come in are entitled to get this circuit breaker credit. So it's fairly common. Now, what is it? On the Massachusetts Form 1, it is the Schedule CB. For 2018 is a maximum of $1,100, and that is a refundable credit. That means even if the taxpayer has zero tax liability, they will get a refund back of up to $1,100. The taxpayer or the spouse must be at least age 65. And the way they qualify for it is if the real estate tax plus 50% of their water and sewer exceeds 10% of total income, then the taxpayer will qualify. Now the credit will be the difference between the real estate tax plus 50% of the water, sewer, and total income up to a maximum of $1,100. So if they're very close to the 10%, you may find that it's a reduced circuit breaker. Now renters, if their rent for the year is if 25% of their rent exceeds the 10%, then they will qualify. However, it's very important. They can't have any subsidized rent. Even small, slightly subsidized rent disqualifies them. Now they still are entitled to the Massachusetts deduction for rent, so make sure that you still give them that deduction. However, they're not entitled to the circuit breaker if they have any subsidized rent whatsoever. Okay, let's talk about what can be included for taxes, water, and sewer costs. So you can include the real estate taxes for the primary residence and the land that it sits on. You can include the CPA surcharge. A number of cities and towns have this fee. It can be up to 3% that it's assessed on the real estate tax bill. You can include municipal water and municipal sewer bills. Now for fees that you can't include, don't include any late fees, penalties, any demand fees, interest. Some towns and cities have trash included on a utility bill, so you have to subtract that out. And then you can't include any private sewer or water costs. So say they have some a private water vendor, or they have a private sewer that they have pumped, they bring you those bills, you cannot include them. Now for 2018, the income limits, you'll see single 58,000, head of household 73,000, married filing jointly 88,000. If the taxpayer is married filing separately, then they are not eligible. You will not even see the credit on the list of credits when you pull up Tax Layer if they're in the MFS filing status. The maximum assessed property value for 2018, 778,000. You can fill out the whole form and you're sitting there trying to figure out why the heck you don't have circuit breaker. You think you do the calculations of the 10%, you think they should qualify and you think they should get it. Do make sure that you note what the assessed value is, because the software will disqualify the taxpayer from getting the credit. Now, the acreage of the principal residence is limited to the property taxes for the home plus a maximum of 1 acre of land. If there's greater than 1 acre, then the land tax must be apportioned. It must be prorated. There's a calculator on the marshalltaxaid.org website under tools that you can use to prorate the taxes. You also have to prorate if it's a multi-unit dwelling or multiple lots. So sometimes you'll see a taxpayer come in with their lot and with the house on it, and then an adjoining lot that maybe is not developed. You could only use the taxes on the lot with the principal residence on it. You can't use the total real estate taxes for both lots. Now, if they're itemizing on the federal side, they can certainly deduct the property taxes for both units, but for the purposes of the circuit breaker, you can only do the lot on which their primary residence is. Now, the scheduled circuit breaker, there's some questions you're going to have to ask if you or your spouse is 65 or older, living status, and then if their homeowner, is it a multi-use or multi-family? If the mailing address of the taxpayer is different from the address of the principal residence, then you have to enter in the address on the Schedule CB. In the case of a homeowner, you're going to enter the assessed value of the principal residence as of, in this case, this was an example that was done in 2017. So assessed value as of the first day of the tax year. You're going to put the real estate taxes for the principal residence and 50% of water and sewer. Now, if there's private sewer, you can't do, sometimes the taxpayer will come in with bills for pumping out their sewer system. Can't use any of those. These have got to be municipal water and sewer bills. In the case of a renter, you're going to put the total amount of rent paid. You also need to include the landlord's name and address. Now, very important, the circuit breaker credit cannot be taken if subsidized housing at all. And that means if there's any federal, state, or municipal subsidy, not entitled to take this credit. If they are entitled for it, then you can take both the rental deduction and the CB credit. Most of the time we say no double dipping, but this is one example where if they're allowed and they qualify to take the rental deduction and the CB credit, they can take both. Okay, we now want to look at adding in any qualifying income. Now, Massachusetts doesn't tax the taxpayer on these additional qualifying income, but it does go into the calculation for circuit breaker. Remember, we're using total income, not taxable income for the calculations. So under miscellaneous income, we're looking for if the taxpayer is receiving any cash public assistance, things like SNAP, food stamps, fuel assistance, those sort of things. Also, are they receiving any regular income, even as gifts for their support? Now, we're not talking about one-time gifts like a birthday gift, but regular support income that they're receiving from a private party. Now, for this last box, we want to add in any additional amounts from pensions and annuities not taxed in Massachusetts. Now, if the taxpayer has an exempt pension from a state or municipal pension, then TaxSlayer will automatically include that in. We don't have to add that here. But if they have something like a Roth IRA, a distribution that hasn't been taxed by Massachusetts, we're going to have to add that here. We also have to add the difference between the gross and taxable amounts for any pensions or annuities that they're receiving. So say, for example, the taxpayer were receiving a $20,000 pension, but the taxable income from it is $18,000. We would want to include $2,000 here as additional income. Now, Massachusetts is not going to tax the taxpayer on it, but it does go into the calculation for total income. Now let's look at the Massachusetts worksheet. We do recommend that you're going to use the worksheet, put the intermediate numbers. Not only does it help make sure that you've done it correctly, but that then the quality reviewer has something that they can refer to. It makes it much easier for them to verify that we've done this correctly for the taxpayer. So You're going to look through the bills and the information that the taxpayers provided you. Remember, it's very important that this is taxes and water and sewer bills that were actually paid during, in this case, this is 2018, that were actually paid during calendar 2018. If they paid a bill early, like late the previous year, or they paid it late, as in they paid it in 2019, you're not going to be able to use it for the purposes of the circuit breaker. It's going to be just what was paid in the tax year that we're working with. Do note that for most towns, you have a calendar year and a fiscal year are different. So usually the Q1 and Q2 of the fiscal year are in August and October, and then Q3 and Q4 are February and May. That's because the towns generally go from a July 1st to a June 30th fiscal year. So we look at the taxpayers. In this case, we're going to do an example with George Grover. And George brings in all his information, and you can see that his taxes for Q3 and Q4, these are fiscal Q3 and Q4, were $894.85. So we're going to write those in those boxes. Then he also gets his preliminary 2019 bill. Remember, fiscal 2019 bill, we actually pay those in August and October of 2018. So he brings in the preliminary bill as well for fiscal 2019, again, which is paid in 2018, and that's $905.15. He brings in his water and sewer, and typically we find either 2 or 4 bills a year. In this case, George has provided you 2 bills. The first part of the year is $488.10. Second one is $636.30. We're going to add those up, and you see that for the year he paid $3,600 of real estate taxes. He paid $1,124.40 for water and sewer. Again, some towns do have 4 bills in the year, others have 2. Another thing to watch out for, a town like Marshfield has water, sewer, and trash in the same bill. So you're going to have to subtract out trash. This is just for water and sewer. We do also calculate what half of the water and sewer is. So in this case, 1124.40 divided in 2, we're going to get 562.20. We look at his bill for the acreage. If he's under 1 acre, it really doesn't matter specifically how much. We're just going to note under an acre. If it were more, we would need to know precisely how much, what the acreage was, because we would need that for prorating. In this case, it's under an acre, so we don't need to do any prorating. Property value, $315,000. And the gross additional in this example, we don't have any, but if he had a pension where he had a difference between gross and net of the pension, we would add that in as we were entering in the pension, and then that way when we got to do the circuit breaker, we would have that information handy, so we don't have to go back into the 1099-R from when we entered it for federal. Okay, we're going to now make the entries in tax layer for George. You'll see that we've already done the federal return. The AGI amount is $2368. It's a pretty common situation that you'll find that someone comes in who really doesn't have a need to do a federal or Massachusetts return. They're below the filing limits, but because they're entitled to the circuit breaker, they do come in. You have to do the federal before you can do a state return. So we're going to click Edit, and we'll bring up Massachusetts. And we're going to scroll down till we find the credits line. We'll click Begin. And you'll see that there's a number of options here. The second from the bottom, Senior Circuit Breaker Credit Schedule CB. Now, the options we have here are for whether you are a homeowner or a renter. In this case, George is a homeowner. And we have to answer if he is a homeowner, is this multi-use or multifamily? In this case, the answer is no. For a multifamily, we would have to prorate it. So say it was a two-family house, we could only use the real estate taxes for the unit that George lived in. But this case, it's a single family, so we're going to answer that no. If the address on the return is different from the address of the principal residence, we would have to click here, begin, and fill out the address of the principal residence. In this case, the address on the return is his principal residence, so we don't need to add that section. So he's the homeowner, and we're going to enter in the assessed value. Remember from our worksheet, that's $315,000. The real estate taxes paid is going to be $3,600. And 50% of the water, that's that 562. If we were a renter, George were a renter, we would enter in the total amount of rent paid and then the landlord name as well as the address. We're going to leave that blank. You only fill out one of the sections, either homeowner or the renter. The last two sections, we're going to fill out miscellaneous income. In this case, George was not entitled, is not eligible for any miscellaneous income, and he doesn't have any additional amounts for pensions. But again, if we would have the difference between any net and gross pensions, we'd have to add that here. You'll notice here that the right now the mass refund amount is 0, so he doesn't owe any taxes, nor does he get any refunds. Once we click save, we're going to go back. You'll see that the calculator now has updated his refund amount to be $1,100. So George is entitled to the full circuit breaker of $1,100. This is an $1,100 credit, refundable credit that he will get back. We'll exit out of the Massachusetts, and we're all done. Okay, now that completes this lesson for the Massachusetts Circuit Breaker credit. Please let us know if you have any questions or comments. Thank you very much.